Hi guys, Dane here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Dane reads.
This is his first novel, published in 1920. I believe he was 23 when he wrote it. As always, I'm going to read you the blurb, then I'm going to go through it and check out some of my tabs before I come back with my overall thoughts and rating at the end. So, published in 1920, This Side of Paradise was Scott Fitzgerald's first novel. It chimed precisely with the brittle mood of the bright young things of the jazz age. Indeed, its instant appeal could be compared to the success of The Catcher in the Rye 30 years later. In a series of literary snapshots, Fitzgerald describes the adolescence and youth of Amory Blaine, in the course of which we see an egoist evolve into a personage. Princeton University never quite forgave the author for his version of the racy and hectic life of the young gentleman of the day. Smart, vain, snobbish, idle, thoughtless, but as effervescent as soda water and leisure and love. And yeah, it's kind of semi-autobiographical as well. So I'm going to go through and check out some of my tabs. So I thought this was a nicely written little paragraph. But Amory, being on the spot, leaned over quickly and kissed Myra's cheek. He had never kissed a girl before, and he tasted his lips curiously, as if he had munched some new fruit. Then their lips brushed like young wild flowers in the wind. We get a reference to Amory reading The White Company, which I assume is the historical novel by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, which I've read that. It was pretty good. I think there are 2 books of The White Company. I'm not sure though, don't quote me on that. And we get a reference to slickers. "You're not a slicker," said Amory suddenly. "A what? A slicker? What the devil's that?" "Well, it's something that there's a lot of them. You're not one, and neither am I, though I am more than you are." "Who is one? What makes you one?" Amory considered. Well, I suppose that the sign of it is when a fellow slicks his hair back with water." And we get some more on slickers here. We get a real break from the hypocrisy of school tradition. The slicker was a definite element of success, differing intrinsically from the prep school big man. So we have a list of what makes them. So the slicker: 1, clever sense of social values. 2, dresses well, pretends that dress is superficial but knows that it isn't. 3, goes into such activities as he can shine in. 4, gets to college and is, in a worldly way, successful. 5, hair slicked. Then we have the big man. 1, inclined to stupidity and unconscious of social values. 2, thinks dress is superficial and is inclined to be careless about it. 3, goes out for everything from a sense of duty. 4, gets to college and has a problematical future, feels lost without his circle, and always says that school days were happiest after all. Goes back to school and makes speeches about what St. Regis's boys are doing. 5, hair not slicked. I don't think I'm either of those in that case. And they're talking about the school here. First it was schools and Amory, alone from St. Regis's, watched the crowds form and widen and form again. St. Paul's Hill, Pomfret, eating at certain tacitly reserved tables in commons, dressing in their own corners of the gymnasium and drawing unconsciously about them a barrier of the slightly less important but socially ambitious to protect them from the friendly, rather puzzled high school element. From the moment he realised this, Amory resented social barriers as artificial distinctions made by the strong to bolster up their weak retainers and keep out the almost strong. Sounds like a lot of stuff in our society, really, doesn't it? And we get some stuff here on like social biases. "People unconsciously admit it," said Amory. "You'll notice a blonde person is expected to talk. If a blonde girl doesn't talk, we call her a doll. If a light-haired man is silent, he's considered stupid. Yet the world is full of dark, silent men and languorous brunettes who haven't a brain in their heads, but somehow are never accused of the dearth." Great couple of lines here. "Nobody seems to bore you," he objected. "About half the world do," she admitted, "but I think that's a pretty good average, don't you?" If you only hate half the world, you hate less of the world than I do. And then we move on to a bit that's stylized as a play, and I'm going to act this out. So we got the right, this is going to be she, and this is going to be he. Alright, so they have a kiss, and he says, "Good Lord, yes, kiss me once more, Rosalind." "No, my curiosity is generally satisfied at one." "Is that a rule?" "I make rules to fit the cases." "You and I are somewhat alike, except that I'm years older in experience." "How old are you?" "Almost 23, you?" 19, just." "I suppose you're the product of a fashionable school." "No, I'm fairly raw material. I was expelled from Spence, I've forgotten why." "What's your general trend?" "Oh, I'm bright, quite selfish, emotional when aroused, fond of admiration." "I don't want to fall in love with you." "Nobody's asked you to." "But I probably will. I love your mouth." "Hush, please don't fall in love with my mouth. Hair, eyes, shoulders, slippers, but not my mouth. Everybody falls in love with my mouth." And here one of the characters is complaining about like modern authors, or at least modern authors to the 1920s. They don't even try. Some of them can write, but they won't sit down and do one honest novel. Most of them can't write, I'll admit. I believe Rupert Hughes tries to give a real comprehensive picture of American life, but his style and perspective are barbarous. Ernest Poole and Dorothy Canfield try, but they're hindered by their absolute lack of any sense of humour. But at least they crowd their work instead of spreading it thin. Every author ought to write every book as if he were going to be beheaded the day he finished it. Good advice there. Not bad from a 23-year-old. Then we have some French poetry. Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne blesse mon cœur d'une langueur monotone. And I think this is just a really beautifully written paragraph. He pictured the rooms where people lived, where the patterns of the blistered wallpapers were heavy, reiterated sunflowers on green and yellow background, where there were tin bathtubs and gloomy hallways and Virgilous unnameable spaces in back of the buildings, where even love dressed as seduction, a sordid murder around the corner, illicit motherhood in the flat above. And always there was the economical stuffiness of indoor winter, and the long summers, nightmares of perspiration between sticky enveloping walls, dirty restaurants where careless tired people helped themselves to sugar with their own used coffee spoons, leaving hard brown deposits in the bowl. God, I hate that. And there are a few bits on this page I wanted to read out. I'm just going to read them in one long read. Amory stopped. He began for the first time in his life to have a strong distrust of all generalities and epigrams. They were too easy, too dangerous to the public mind. Yet all thought usually reached the public after 30 years in some such form. Benson and Chesterton had popularised Huysmans and Newman. Shaw had sugar-coated Nietzsche and Ibsen and Schopenhauer. The man in the street heard the conclusions of dead genius through someone else's clever paradoxes and didactic epigrams. Life was a damned muddle, a football game with everyone offside and the referee gotten rid of. Everyone claiming the referee would have been on his side. 23! How do you write that at 23? That's great! And we get this idea that advertising basically allows creatives to have a job. What's your difficulty? Lost your job? Not exactly, but well, call it that. What was it? Writing copy for an advertising agency. Lots of money in advertising. Amory smiled discreetly. Oh, I'll admit there's money in it eventually. Talent doesn't starve anymore. Even art gets enough to eat these days. Artists draw your magazine covers, write your advertisements, hash out ragtime for your theatres. By the great commercialising of printing, you found a harmless, polite occupation for every genius who might have carved his own niche. But beware the artist who's an intellectual also. The artist who doesn't fit. The Rousseau, the Tolstoy, the Samuel Butler, the Amory Blaine. Who's he? Demanded the little man suspiciously. Well, said Amory, he's an intellectual personage, not very well known at present. And I think this is interesting again if you bear in mind this was written in 1920 as opposed to 2020, when the same is even truer. Modern life, began Amory again, changes no longer century by century, but year by year, 10 times faster than it ever has before. Populations doubling, civilizations unified more closely with other civilizations, economic independence, racial questions, and we're dawdling along. My idea is that we've got to go very much faster. And then we get some bits on socialism, which again I think is very interesting for the time because it's kind of seeing a resurgence at the moment. I would say I myself, I have socialist leanings. I don't know if I'm a socialist. I don't really ascribe to any particular political view, to be honest. I just judge different situations based on what the best reaction would be, which is what I think we should do rather than pointing the blame game and being like, it's all the Democrats' fault, it's all the Republicans' fault, it's all Labour's fault, it's all Tories' fault. It's like, no, it's all stupid people's fault who put party politics over doing what was best for the country. But anyway, it's not all rubbish, cried Amory passionately. This is the first time in my life I've argued socialism. It's the only panacea I know. I'm restless. My whole generation is restless. I'm sick of a system where the richest man gets the most beautiful girl if he wants her, where the artist without an income has to sell his talents to a button manufacturer. Even if I had no talents, I'd not be content to work 10 years, condemned either to celibacy or a furtive indulgence, to give some man's son an automobile. But if you're not sure, that doesn't matter, exclaimed Amory. My position couldn't be worse. A social revolution might land me on top. Of course I'm selfish. It seems to me I've been a fish out of water in too many outworn systems. I was probably one of the 24 men in my class at college who got a decent education. Still, they'd let any well-tutored flathead play football, and I was ineligible, because some silly old men thought we should all profit by conic sections. I loathe the army. I loathe business. I'm in love with change and I've killed my conscience. So yeah, again, for such a young man as he was at the time, I think this is a really well written book. I mean, to be fair, obviously you're going to want to start with The Great Gatsby, and I think, for me at least anyway, I enjoyed Fitzgerald's short stories more than his novels. So I would possibly recommend Gatsby and then a short story collection. The Diamond as Big as the Ritz would be my go-to for that. But if you do want to read some more Fitzgerald and this sounds like your cup of tea, definitely give it a read. I gave it a pretty strong 3.5 out of 5. So there we have it, that's what I made of This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. As always, don't forget to let me know in the comments if you've read this book, and if so, what you thought of it. Hit that like button if you've enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button for more, and I will see you soon for another bookish video. Thanks a lot, bye bye.